Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stratch Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the support tier list for patch 14.8 and really briefly looking at the patch notes for a few minutes before we go in there. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Usually goes on from about 11:30 p.m. till about 1 a.m. Sometimes a bit earlier, sometimes a bit later. But that's what we're doing these days. About an hour and a half or 2 hours. So usually like 2 or 3 games. But it's always a great time if you want to come out, hang out. I am going to start covering Total War again if you care about that. So when the new DLC releases, I'm going to start doing some more campaigns with that. I'll have more videos about all that coming up in other future videos. And I would like to start doing some more guides for League of Legends. So at least like a recon guide because I play them so much. But maybe covering some more topical stuff too. I've got about 3 more weeks of classes and then I get summer break. So I'll still be really busy with just, kids and life and all this other stuff going on, but hopefully I'll have a bit more time to give you guys even more content than I have been able to do recently. So anyways, let's go ahead and get in here. Alright, so not a ton I don't think is going to change for support. Now there aren't a lot of direct changes to support here, but there are some changes to things like ADCs and junglers and void grubs and Baron that could ultimately affect support kind of in indirect ways. So we'll hit it really quick and just talk about it. Okay, so Vanguard is not here yet. I know a bunch of people had problems with that. I don't love it, but I'm probably not going to quit League over it. I just don't think cheating is that big of a problem, honestly, like in League of Legends. I mean, yeah, there are some aimbots. I don't know. I obviously don't play like Challenger, but I don't think very, very few times have I ever suspected someone of like legit using something like not aimbot, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The thing that aims the skill shots, usually with Xerath and stuff like that. Maybe once or twice, right, in like the thousands of games I played. So I don't think it really requires like this degree. Maybe they're trying to crack down on bots with this. I mean, the main way, like, why do bots exist right now? If you think about it, bots exist so that people can buy a level 30 account for probably some cheap amount of money, $10 or something. I've never bought one. But because they want to bypass the leveling process because it sucks. It takes like 100 to 150 hours before you can actually get to level 30 and play the real game, like play ranked against other players. I understand there's some kind of learning curve to League, right? And you don't want like completely new players that have never played being in ranked. But just make them play some amount of normal games that's not 100 hours, right? Just say, hey, you have to play 10 games of normal before you can play ranked or whatever. And the ranked system will filter them out, right? Like, eventually, if they're just not doing that well, it's going to bring them down into the lower tiers until they start getting fair games. Then they can learn, then they can work their way up the ladder. Like, everybody had to start somewhere. So I just think the leveling system, if their concern is the bots, fix the leveling system. Just get rid of it, period. Or, if it makes you too much money, then offer a way that people can pay to bypass it so they can get it in a clean way. I'm sure there are a lot of people that would pay to just come in and say, like, hey, $15, $20, whatever the number is, you automatically get to level 30, and we'll give you whatever the number is, 50,000 blue essence to go buy yourself, some champs. Something like that. I think they need to do that. And then, maybe cut down the time that it takes to level. Maybe make it 30 hours. Even that's a lot. Maybe 20 hours. Something reasonable where people could still do it for free, but I'm telling you, a lot of people would pay that $15 to $20 that they're paying the botters right now. They would pay that directly to League. To get those level 30 accounts. Now, their argument might be, well, we don't want people making smurfs, right? We don't want people doing this and that. Again, they're buying it from the bots and stuff like that. And people who are smurfing most of the time, like, they're either going to climb really quickly and get out of that elo, or they're going to end up about where they are to begin with. Like, a gold person who's smurfing is probably still going to end up in gold, pretty quickly. And that's a money-making opportunity for them, because when they have more accounts, then they're able to, or they're gonna have to buy more skins and buy the chromas and buy all the stuff all over again. So that's more time. Probably buy more blue essence so they can get more champions. It's a big moneymaker for Riot either way. And there are legit reasons why people might want alternate accounts too. right? So, for example, if you're kind of a higher level player, if you play in, Diamond Plus or even Emerald or whatever, and you have some friends that you like to play with socially that are silver or whatever or gold, you can't play with them on your normal account. So having another account so you can play with them is fun. And you don't have to be malicious about it. You don't have to just totally stomp people. You could try to learn a new role, learn new champions. Even if you're not playing with friends, if you want to diversify and try something else, you don't want to do that on your main account because it's going to be a bad experience for you and for other people in your team because you don't know what you're doing. So, if it was easier, maybe there would be more people instead of first timing a champ on their highest ranked account. I mean, realistically, they probably will. But maybe some of those people will go and first time a champ on their alt account that's lower level, so it's a more fair game because they're not as good on that champ. So I think there are, legit reasons why you would want an alt account. And if they really care about not allowing people to have alt accounts, just require a phone number. It's a lot less invasive than this. If you just said, hey, one phone number, one account. I know people can get spoof phone numbers and all this other stuff, like fake phone numbers and stuff, but it's a lot harder to do than like an email address. So I think that if they really care about stopping Smurfs, then they would just do it with phone numbers. And if it's concern about bots and cheating, just make the leveling system better for new players or for making alt accounts. They make more money. It's a win-win for everybody. And you don't have to use this invasive software. But anyways, sorry, I went on a rant about that more than I needed to. But this just seems, especially the fact that it's China, man. No hate for the actual people of China, okay? Chinese history and lore, and I'm sure the people are wonderful. I've had lots of Chinese exchange students. They were great to talk to. But the Chinese government is a different thing. And the Chinese government, who is known for cyber attacks and espionage and all this crap, and we're in kind of an adversarial relationship with them in the United States, at least right now. This is not great in my mind, that it's specifically China. I mean, Google and Amazon and stuff are bad enough to give your data to, but giving it to China is even worse. So again, I really don't like it, but am I going to stop playing League over it? Probably not. But that's kind of my thoughts on Vanguard. Okay, champions, Akali, health up a little bit, not going to affect support. She probably could use a little buff, that's fine. Azir getting nerfed is a joke. He's obviously not great in solo queue unless you one-trick him. And his win rate in pro, I looked this up with Jason the other day, who obviously has one-tricked Azir for years. In pro, I think on the most recent patch, he had like a low 50% win rate, and he was like the 4th most picked or something. Well, we just look it up right now. But these are not numbers that warrant a nerf. I understand that people talk about him a lot, but when you actually look at the play rates and stuff, most commentators I've seen too, like Kadril, I Will Dominate, people that are covering like China and Europe and LCK, because NA hasn't played in like a month or something at this point. And let's be honest, those are more competitive regions most of the time, especially the eastern regions. A lot of them think that Azir is pretty overrated too, but if we go here and look, right, at mid lane on 14-7, again, I think it was like we just look right here. It's a 44% win rate with 49% presence on this patch that a lot of the tournaments have been played on. Like, those are not numbers that need to be nerfed. Because usually they will justify nerfs. Typically, they'll look at presence. So they'll say if something is getting banned a lot and picked a lot, then that means that it's actually really good, right? So they don't look at win rates as much because it's such a low sample size of games. And something getting banned, they take it as meaning that that's universally stronger or perceived to be stronger by the community, even more so than win rates a lot of times. But it's none of those. It's not a high win rate. It's not a particularly high ban rate. It's not a high presence. Like, yeah, he's picked, but he's not the most picked. Sorry, the site's like messing up. But just take my word for it. It's not worth like nerfing him. So I really don't understand. So yeah, he's picked some. He's a top 5 like pick, but it's still not a high presence. There's a lot of diversity in mid lane right now, statistically, and he doesn't have a great win rate, and he's an interesting champion. I think yeah, he does have to scale, but there are really big, exciting plays with him. Like, it's not like he's anti-fun to watch or anti-fun to play. I think that he's a very interesting champ, and there's a lot of counterplay champions to him that are also powerful and popular. Corki is probably the most notorious one, but there are lots of others, so I really don't like that ban, but whatever. Doesn't affect support. Okay, Briar. Mostly nerfs, a little bit of buff to the Q. She still seems like kind of strong in my games, but not like overwhelmingly strong. Like, there's no way you can deal with that champion. It feels like her healing is a little crazy, but it might also just be that a lot of people don't get grievous wounds. So I guess you nerf her a little bit. I think she's fine. Like, statistically, I don't think she's that big of a deal. She has like no pro presence. Yeah, she's still like 52% even after the nerf. So it's fine, whatever. I don't think she needed anything, but that's okay. Draven, okay, so this is actually pretty nice. Like, Draven is picked in pro occasionally. He can still be pretty good in solo queue. I think he's a bit off meta because I think the meta right now is in solo queue is heavily slanting towards scaling champions. So like your Jinx, your Twitches, your Kog'Maws are the highest statistical champions right now in solo queue. The Grubs are going to make that stronger because champs that can siege are going to get, you know, more benefit out of those Grubs. I guess that's really probably most beneficial towards split pushers. But if you can't end engage champs, some of them are good, but there's a lot of enchanters that are also good. So if you can strong side Draven, if your jungler is going to pay attention to bottom, if you're pretty confident in that, and especially if you have an engaged support to go with it, you know, Rakan, Blitz, Pike, Leona, those are probably the strongest ones right now. And you get him ahead, obviously he's really good. So this is going to help him snowball a little bit early, but you got to be really careful because he does fall off pretty hard late, especially if you lose your stacks, and especially in like 5v5 team fights, particularly against tanks. So, and there aren't a lot of tanks that are popular, so that does make him pretty strong right now. So, yeah, I guess he could use a little bit of love. That's fine. Gallo got some changes. I don't think it's going to matter too much. He's still not going to be great, in my opinion. They're just playing it too safe with these changes. They got to just give him some more power. The Graves thing, they changed this reload time, which I thought was going to be OP when I first read this from the patch notes, or at least problematic with several items. You know, if he starts getting stuff like Phantom Dancer, like there are a few other things that give like pretty good movement speed and like attack speed. But they changed it, so this no longer works. So it's just a crit damage, so that's fine. I think Graves is like okay in the meta. He's not amazing, but he's not horrible either. They're buffing Wei. I feel like Wei is already pretty good. Like, I've seen some Weis pop off in solo queue. I think people are getting better at him. He does have some presence in pro and does okay. I don't remember what his win rate was. The page is not doing well right now. That shows the pro win rates, but that's fine, I guess, to buff him up a little bit, but you got to be careful. He's pretty strong. Okay, but that doesn't seem like that's too over the top. Jarvan, a little off meta, but I mean, it's in theory they said that increasing the grubs on this patch should make early game junglers a little bit better because you have another minute before grub spawns, so now you can force fights around Dragon for 1 minute and then go contest grubs. You can contest both objectives, whereas before, you know, their reasoning was that passive junglers could sort of get a free pass early on with objectives because you just traded. If they went grubs, you got Dragon for free. If you got Dragon, they got grubs. But now, aggressive junglers can potentially contest both. So, and Jarvan is an aggressive early game jungler. And he does have, like, really nice utility. So the fact that he can lock down champs that don't have a dash, so things like Jinx, Twitch, Kog'Maw that I just mentioned before, a lot of the hyper-scaling champs don't have a lot of mobility, outside of a few, Zeri, stuff like that, that I don't think have high win rates in solo queue right now. But anyways, he's good against a lot of stuff out there. Also very good against enchanters. Janna a little bit less so if she interrupts his QE with her tornado, but nevertheless, he's pretty good into immobile champions, and he does have the attack speed buff. He has armor shred, so he has a lot of stuff going for him. We'll see what his win rate is here. I don't think he's going to be like too much of a menace, but that's helpful. Yeah, 51%. He could have used a little love, and there it is, so that's fine. Okay, Jhin. Jhin, I think, is pretty good right now. I would put Jhin in solo queue either in like tier 1 or tier 2. So he's getting a little bit more movement speed when he crits. This is pretty big because typically he'll take Boots of Swiftness with this. And a lot of times he'll get other movement speed items too. So something like Storm Razor or Rapid Fire Cannon, stuff like that. So stacking these different movement speeds up multiplicatively is really nice. So that's going to help him kind of maneuver around, sort of clarify his identity that he's really good at dancing around bruisers and a lot of fighters that don't have like a ton of sticking power. So I think that's really his strength, is taking those champs down. He can dance around tanks too, but it takes him a really long time to break through most tanks. But he is very, very good against squishies and chaining CC with his W. Now, they aren't buffing that at all, but his W, when you get a bunch of points in, I think it's almost like 2.25 seconds, and it's a really long range. So, anyways, this will help him kite better, and this will help him wave clear better. So it's not a lot early on, but it's certainly a lot more later, you know, going from 74%. That's total AD too, not bonus AD. So that includes the AD that you get per level. That's a lot. That's, what, 44 plus 26? 70? Well, I guess that's easy. I mean, that's easy math. Look, man, I'm old. Give me a break. Okay. But yeah, 70. 70% extra AD. So if you have 200 AD, which is not hard to get to, you know, in the mid game, that's a lot. And he gets a lot of bonus, like attack speed converts over to AD, right? So he gets quite a lot of AD at the end of the day. So yeah, that grenade's going to be popping. It's going to hit harder. So that's really, really nice. So I'm not sure that Jhin needed the buff, but it is helpful. I'm glad they didn't change. They were going to change something by like 1 AD. Oh, they did. Okay, so they did change the base damage by 1 AD just to put it all fours, which is kind of troll. But increasing the AD ratio is good. Wait a minute. Hold on. Sorry, I'm crazy. I'm losing my mind. I thought this was the ratio here, the percentage. Okay, so it's going from 65% AD to 74% AD. Okay, so less crazy, but nice boost. Sorry about that. I don't know. Senior moment. Okay, Kaisa Q damage. Kaisa's already like pretty decent in solo queue, I think. So I'm not 100% sure why they're buffing her up a lot. It's getting better bonus AD to kind of try to discourage AP Kaisa. I mean, I think AP Kaisa is kind of what makes her most unique, where she just dives in and she's like an AD assassin, but that can potentially be too strong. This gives her too much power with like Q poke plus AD like assassination plus being pretty good auto attacker. So they're just trying to say, look, we want her to be more of an auto attack based champ. Like evasive, takes her time to kill somebody, so she can't just one shot someone. Okay. LeBlanc, not a huge deal. This champion's really obnoxious. She's like okay, but not great in the current meta, and that's fine. Mordekaiser's the big marquee one a lot of people were talking about. They thought this would be really OP, and I wasn't sure how this would go down. I thought that he might be a little strong, that you can't QSS his ult anymore, but realistically, especially at lower elos, a lot of players may not even know that interaction, and a lot of them just don't buy the QSS anyways. And they did nerf his base damage on his E at least to compensate for that. Although his Q is a lower cooldown. So, I don't know. I think that doing something like this is a good idea. I just don't like items that just completely shut down other champions. And QSS has probably been the worst offender of that overall. So, I like where, especially ultimates. So, I like that they're getting rid of this on him. And yeah, and there's balance around it if you need to. But his win rate is not that high right now. I think it was like 51%, 52%, something like that. It wasn't that outrageous. I don't know how much it's gone up from where it was, but he's like 51%. He's it's a pretty interesting interaction when he takes you in there. You're trying to like jump around and not die. So he's a kind of cool champion for a bruiser. So I think that's fine. And we need more AP bruisers that are viable too. Okay, Olaf getting a little bit more weight, like clear in the jungle. Probably not a big deal. I still don't think he's going to be that amazing, but certain matchups he can be good. Okay, Rise. This champ definitely needs some help. He's been pretty bad for a long time, I think. I mean, I just never see him. Maybe he's good and people just don't play him. But, okay, a little bit of love. This doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It's not affecting his damage that much, just like quality of life. Okay, Skarner's getting a lot of changes. I'm not going to go through all of those. I think he's pretty decent right now. Yeah, he's at 52, 53%. So, that's fine. You can just read all that stuff on your own. I think he's like a pretty decent kind of bruiser engaged champ. He's in a better spot than he was. I'm not sure if he's being played. Is he being played mostly top or yeah? It's mostly top rather than jungle right now. But he's okay. Okay, Silas. Silas is a very interesting champion. I think sometimes he can be over the top. I think the healing on his W is the most obnoxious part of him though. So allowing him to go jungle as well, I think is nice. They've been doing this with a lot of champs, and they back it up on some champs like Rel recently. I don't think they should have completely gut Rel from the jungle. Just like don't completely take away her ratios. Just nerf him a little bit. Instead of 100% extra damage or whatever it was, make it 75. If that's still O2 OP, make it 50%. I don't think she was like insanely powerful. Definitely not in solo queue, but even in pro, like yes, she was picked, but I mean, I don't know what her win rate was, but the games I watched, it didn't look like overwhelming. I definitely saw her lose some games. But anyways, a whole different discussion from last patch. Okay, it is what it is now. Base armor, magic resist. I do think Thresh could use some love. That's good. I think they ultimately need to rework his soul system and not tie it to armor. So I think that, you know, they could use it to just increase his other abilities, right? Like either make his chain longer, lower the cooldown on the chain, increase the damage on the chain. Same thing with Lantern. You could make it longer. You could just increase the stats on it. Just something that's not his survivability, because this is the biggest thing that affects him early on is other tanks are just way tankier than he is, and he doesn't really outscale that. Like they get so much armor per level, they get like 3 per level, and he doesn't get any, so he has to get 6 souls per level just to break even, and he's starting off in a huge deficit. And like that's the soul taking a lot of times, especially, well, at all points in the game, like it does require some risk. If you step up and try to get some souls, you're going to be eating auto attacks. You might be putting yourself in risk of getting engaged on. Like it's not free. The armor that you get is completely free, right? You just level up and that's it. So I like stacking mechanics. He's one of the OG original stacking, at least supports that was out there. Like, I guess collection stacking type of stuff. So I like it. It's fun. Gathering stuff is cool. Collecting stuff is good. You feel yourself powering up. I just think they need to redo it in a way that's similar to something like Bard, where when he gets to certain breakpoints, when he gets to, like, every 20 souls, he gets some kind of little upgrade to something would be nice. Now, that might require a little mini rework, but Thresh is a super cool champion. It's just one of the only things that holds him back, in my opinion, is that soul stacking and just that he's so weak. To all ends early. Okay. Now it seems ironic because he's kind of best early game if he's landing the hooks, but if he's on the receiving end of getting engaged on, a lot of times it can be rough. Okay, Zeri's getting nerfed a little bit, probably because of pro. Again, I don't think she was that overwhelmingly powerful. She's okay, but she wasn't rocking like 60+%, I don't think. But alright, sure. Nashor's tougher. I think that's good. I think there should be basically no way you ever solo Nash. And I think it should be a lot more dangerous to try to take Nash. It's just too easy and too powerful right now. So, okay. And now you have to actually watch where you're standing and, dodge things. So, I think that's good. Making him a little more interactive instead of just making him a huge stat stick. And then Void Grubs. They're spawning later, but you get more bonus off of it. I think this is going to be very good for split pushers and siege comps, obviously. So I think that's nice, and I think it's going to be a lot more contested now because you can't just trade Dragon for Void. So there's going to be more times where you're fighting for Dragon or fighting for Void. You're not just trading them early in the game as often. That will still happen if it's desynced especially, but anyways, okay, let's get to the tier list here now that I've talked about other stuff for 25 minutes. Okay, so not a ton of surprises on the tier list. At least I don't think so. There are a few, though, that have kind of shifted around. Okay, so I've got Janna up here. I moved Janna all the way up to S. I mean, some people would argue she should be an S the whole time, but she's just been here despite, Mandate getting nerfed, which she was rushing early to apply extra pressure, despite ZZ Rock getting nerfed. She's still here. And a lot of the types of AD carries that I talked about before, Janna's really, really good with them, especially Jinx. So she can peel Jinx really well. Jinx is super popular. I think she's the most popular ADC, or certainly one of them, and one of the highest win rates. So Jinx is kind of everywhere right now. And not only does she peel really well with the tornado and the ult, but she has one of the best steroids in the game where she puts that shield on him. And I think it's still like 30 or 40 AD base? 30 at max level, but it does scale with AP a little bit. Used to be higher. I think it used to be as high as like 40, possibly 50. They have increased the shield a lot over time, right? So it used to be 240 way back in the day. Then they nerfed it down to as low as like 180 or something, and now they've buffed it back up to 220 over time. Has a lower AP ratio on it, but it's still pretty good. I don't know. Did they get rid of the decay on it? I know they did some like recent changes to Janna, but I just can't remember all of the changes they did to her. Okay, it looks like they got rid of the decay. So that's actually extremely good. Because if it stays up for the life of it, or I don't know, like you're just losing a lot of value, and it's really hard to calculate decay, like in your mind, how much shield you're actually getting. Like it says 220, but by the time you take 2 auto attacks, maybe it's already decayed 20 or 30, so your real shield is like 190. Just get rid of that decaying crap, and I think that's what they did. They just made it 220 flat, no decay. You get the bonus AD, which is really good for crit champions that are going to have a lot of AD, so like Jinx with rockets. It's really powerful. And if you're landing, a decent amount of like Qs, Ws, Rs, just all of your other abilities also lower the cooldown on this. So it's 12 seconds, but really, if you land like 2 of these abilities, then it's going down to like 8 seconds. And that's not even including CDRs. So you can probably get it down to like 5 seconds or something pretty comfortably in a lot of fights. She can trade early against melees pretty well with her W or short range champs. If you're trading with another like caster or magic user or something, they're probably going to hit harder than she does. But she can still trade pretty well early on. So fantastic peel, great at protecting if you have the higher scaling ADC, and that's a really important caveat. If you have Ezreal on your team and they have Jinx, you're going to be in big trouble because now you have no way to force fights on the Jinx. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I haven't had her up here before. I'm kind of doing them slightly out of order, but they're all S tier. They're all like similar, I think, in my mind. Is that you can't start fights. So you're really reliant on your teammates to be able to run up and start fights for you. And Janna doesn't have any like offensive speed ups to help people get in there and do those fights. So she can peel the backline really well. She can rotate side to side really well because she's very fast, and she can protect herself when she's walking around and warding. And that's something that makes her a lot better at warding and rotations and kind of like split push games. And kind of, working around split pick comps, that type of thing, is because she does have the tornado, she does have her ult, and she's fast. So if someone tries to run her down, it's very, very difficult to catch her. Especially if, I think she's running, like Aerie these days. She's not doing the Glacial Augment thing anymore. That made her even tougher to run down. But she's back on the Aerie train for the early aggression. So yeah, I think she's good if you're trying to rotate to side lanes and ward and sort of hover around your shadow, your split pusher, and protect them if people collapse on them or help them get out of situations. She's very versatile in that sense, but she can't start fights herself very well at all. You just kind of have to run up and W somebody and hope that slow's good enough. And sometimes that works, but that's really sketchy. You can do the Iron Dream of flashing, and then R'ing and knocking somebody back. Occasionally that comes up, right? But realistically, that you probably shouldn't be doing that too much. And they lowered the cooldown. I forgot about that. It used to be a 150 cooldown, so 130 is actually really, really nice. So, yeah, Janna, very good, especially if you're confident you're going to have the higher scaling ADC. She's quite good. Okay. And then while we're at Enchanters, I'll just go ahead and mention Sona too. Sona did get some changes last patch, so I think her early game got nerfed a little bit, but the scaling on her W was quite high. So Sona, it moved her up. She already had a pretty high win rate, but now she's even higher. So yeah, she's pushing 54% here. And didn't they make Archangel stronger or something? Like they lowered the cost maybe to 2,900. I thought they messed with something with Archangel or tier that I remember thinking like that's going to make her stronger. And then, of course, the W has a 30% scaling now on the heal. So that just affects kind of 2 people, but that is pretty nice because I think it used to be 15% scaling. Shield is still the same, the thing that affects a lot of different people. But a couple patches ago, they buffed her W, they buffed her E as far as the movement speed aura, I think by a little bit. And then the Q, I think the damage itself got buffed, like the 2 little bolts that go out, or maybe they're just the same, I can't remember. But the aura that you give other people got nerfed, something like that. Either way, they shuffled around her stats a bit, and it ended up making her a little bit stronger. So she's one of the best scaling supports in the game in terms of if you just have clean 5v5s where everyone's grouped up, then she's going to win a lot of those almost every time, right? So again, she works best if you have the higher scaling comp because you can't really force a lot of action on Jinx very easily. You can flash ult, stuff like that, but she's, not great at engaging on people. Now, she does rotate pretty well, similar to Janna. She's got that E, and you can help someone else rotate with you, so that's good. But she's a lot more vulnerable to getting engaged on, so you have to be careful, right? If a Kha'Zix jumps over a wall at you while you're trying to clear a ward around Dragon, you're probably dead, okay? So you got to be a little bit more careful with her. So her vision control is worse. Her skirmishing and kind of rotations are worse. But she can still move. She just can't protect herself very well. So very good if you can bully early. I think she's probably a better bully than Janna early. It depends. Obviously, she's got a heal that she can use to sustain through, especially after your first back and you get tier. So that's handy. Your Q, I believe, has a little bit more range than Janna's W. I think Janna's W is like 550 or 600-ish range, and I think the Q on Sona is like 700. I feel like you can outrange a little bit to poke more consistently, and you can't miss, and it can hit 2 people. But again, she's going to be more vulnerable to your Leonas, your Dravens, your Tristanas, just all these all-in champs in ways that Janna isn't. So I think she still deserves the top spot. The lower your elo goes, the better she's going to be, in my opinion, because people just aren't going to force action. They're not going to close out games, and that's just going to let her get more items and scale better. So really good. And then Blitz. Not a lot has changed on Blitz. It's the same thing that it always is when Blitz is really good. There's a lot of squishy champs in the meta right now, and he can grab and kill them. I mean, that's basically it. So if you're against something like a Janna, like a Sona, and then all the popular ADCs, or most of them, right? Your Jinx, well, I guess even including Jhin to some extent, right? Jinx, Jhin, Kog'Maw, and Twitch, I think are all the highest win rate ADCs right now. All of them are extremely vulnerable to hook. Especially since they took Gale Force out of the game. Champs can't itemize into that to dodge the hook as easily. So, yeah, if you get ahead early and you can bully them and even just stand in a bush or something and just pressure them off the wave, it's absolutely devastating if their jungler doesn't come down there and interfere. Now, Blitz is somewhat vulnerable to ganks. He does have the speed up with his W, but he doesn't have any dashes, and he's not great in like all-out skirmishes. Really, he just has to pull somebody out of position, you blow him up. That's what he does. So, pretty bad in 5v5 clean fights. Pretty bad if you're really far behind and you can't get vision control of places. But if you're ahead, if you have vision on them, if you could force objectives and make them come face check the bush or the wall that you're standing next to, and you just grab the support when they're trying to ward or something, it's just absolutely devastating. So, Blitz, very high risk, high reward champion. And then, of course, Rakan, I don't have to say a lot about that. If you're new to the channel, just, watch some of my streams. I talk about him all the time. He's pretty much always top of the S tier for me. Am I biased? Of course. But he's doing very well in pro. I don't remember exactly what his win rate was. It was like high 50s, low 60s. His win rate in solo queue is still pretty good. It's gone down a bit, but I think it was like 51 or 52%. I will say that Rakan is not great into Janna, who's really popular right now. That's one of his... I think my personal win rate against Janna is okay for some reason, but I think historically, not amazing. She has 2 different buttons that can peel your engage, and she's going to outscale you most of the time. So Janna's pretty obnoxious to deal with, and she's obviously really strong right now. Jinx is surprisingly kind of annoying to deal with for trading in lane, because when she drops those chompers, like, you have to... The way that you try to E back out, it can be really obnoxious to try to, like... Because usually what you want to do as Rakan is you go in with your W whenever they step up to creep. If they get too close, hit them with your W, hit them with your Q, and then you E back out. So you still can kind of do that to Jinx, but if she throws down chompers, like, usually cutting you off from getting back out with the E, like, just a little bit in front of her. If she tries to drop it right on top of her, you're going to be out before they activate. But if she throws it a little bit in front of her, a lot of times, then they're going to, come online before you can E back out. So a lot of times they'll throw the chompers to stop the ADC. They'll throw it at the ADC to stop them from coming in and, landing auto attacks while you W them. And you're just, incidentally, you're going to get blocked from Eing back to the ADC a lot of times. You have to kind of walk around a little bit to get the angle, usually, to get your E to get back out. So that means you're going to be vulnerable to, getting hit by support spells, getting, 1 or 2 auto attacks from Jinx. So you can still engage on her and get some pretty good hits, but it just depends on how fast she is and where she puts those chompers. It can be pretty annoying to try to get around that than some of the other champs out there. So, not amazing in a Janna, okay in a Jinx, but not amazing in a Jinx. Still pretty good against Kog'Maw and Twitch. Rakan is somewhat of a weak laner too. Once you get to level 3, you can trade pretty well, but he is short range. You can kind of heal through stuff with your Q, but, if they have, like, double ranged, especially long range, if they have, like, Kog'Maw Janna or Jinx Janna or something like that, and you've got, Rakan and then, some other champ that just doesn't quite blast people a ton in the early game, then it's going to be really hard to win lane a lot of times if you don't have gank assist. So that is one kind of knock on Rakan right now, is it is sort of a scaling ADC meta, and you're kind of weak in lane. So if you have the scaler on your team, if you have the Jinx or the Kog'Maw or whatever, then that's still going to be really good, because you kind of get the perks of an enchanter where you can peel really well, but you can also engage if you need to, and you have some of the best vision control in the game, so you can get down really good wards to protect yourself somewhat from, getting ganked, getting dove, to some extent. So I still think Rakan is really good. I wouldn't really argue if most people want to put him down to, like, tier 2, but I would not put him lower than tier 2. He's just too versatile, and he's still extremely good into most champions, right? Yes, like I said, Janna, Jinx, some of the more popular champs aren't his best matchups, but he's still not, like, completely horrible in those matchups. He can make it happen. It's just, going to be a tougher matchup for him right there than it would be against, like, a Sona or a Brand or a Leona or most of these other champs. Okay, tier 2. So Brand is still pretty good. He has been nerfed quite a bit. I could see him being a little bit lower. And again, this is going to be a very elo dependent kind of pick. So, the lower the elo goes, I think the better Brand is going to get, because people are not going to dodge his skill shots as much. There's just going to be more kills in the game in general, which means he's going to get his gold to get his items. So if he has items, he does a lot of damage, especially if they have a lot of melees and they're grouping up for team fights. He can do quite a bit of damage. So that's nice, but they have nerfed the ZZ item, whatever it was, the Zizok whatever item, and they nerf support gold, where you get 200 less gold, which does matter when you're trying. It matters a lot more when you're trying to buy 3,000 gold items, because it's going to put you a lot further behind. If you're still buying cheap items on support, right? If you're buying enchanter items, tank items, that are like 2,300, 2,400 gold, that's fine. But these AP champs really, need those expensive items. So you're very strong off of one item though, like Leandri's, and you have a lot of base damage built in. So that is very nice, and that's why Brand and Zyra are two of the most popular and powerful mage supports of all time, is because they have a lot of high baseline damage. They don't need a lot of items, right? Because Brand has that percentage damage and the burn, and then Zyra has the plants, and they both work extremely well with Leandri's, because the plants trigger it a lot, the burn triggers it a lot, and they work really well with Rylai's. Which historically has been a cheap item. It's more now than it used to be, but it's still like a pretty good item. So anyway, so those two are still pretty good. I tend to like Brand a little bit more right now. I think that he can just more consistently trade. His cooldowns are a lot lower. Mana's not as much of an issue as it used to be because of the new like mana regen on the support items is pretty handy. So I tend to like him a little bit more. He does also do quite a bit of damage to things like Baron and Dragon and Grubs. So, he's really good at taking objectives for his support, especially once he gets Leandri's. So with Baron getting a little bit stronger, that could be very helpful. But, he still suffers from a lot of AP support problems. If you fall behind, if you don't have the gold, yes, he has fairly high base damage, but he still kind of needs items. He definitely needs items more than stuff like Janna or Rakan, for example. They just have just a lot more built-in utility, right? Their shields, they either have engage or disengage. Like, they just do a lot more. He's also extremely vulnerable to engage. So if you're against something like a Leona, Rakan, Nautilus, or if you're weak-sided, right? If your jungler is not going to be there and the enemy jungler is just going to camp you over and over again, you're going to have a bad day trying to play Brand. So he can be quite good if you're strong side, right? If your jungler's coming down, or if neither jungler comes down and you just get to constantly push them into tower and just spam spells on them while they're under tower, yeah, he feels great, right? But if you get camped, it's bad. Also, in the mid to late game, when you got to rotate, when you're trying to walk up and down that river for an objective, or you're trying to get some vision in the enemy jungle, again, that Kha'Zix jumps over a wall at you, or any jungler, you're probably dead. He doesn't have escapes, and he's very squishy. So, vision control is quite bad. Rotations are quite bad. Team fight damage is really high, and early game pressure is really high. So, I would pair him together with champs that can snowball very well. So, stuff like a Draven, Tristana. Now, those champs are kind of off meta a little bit. Draven's getting a buff here, so that's good. But the lethality did get nerfed. And so I think a lot of the items right now are favoring those critical strike scaling champs. And he's not necessarily going to be the best to pair with something like a Twitch or Kog'Maw, Jinx. Now, especially with Jinx, you can get away with like hard pushing into the lane with Jinx rockets and like Brand spells and just kind of like bully your way through some matchups if the jungler doesn't come down. But if you're behind in a lane, right? If you've got something like a Twitch early on who's not amazing early, he can be okay in the right situations. And like Kog'Maw, you're just asking for ganks. It's going to be gank city a lot of times. So he can be good. You just have to be careful. Leona, I think she got a couple of buffs a few patches ago. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. I think where they like buff her W to give her some more resistances or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. But she's actually doing quite well right now. Her win rate's pretty high. Great user of the tank items, which I think are some of the best support items right now. You got your Locket, Knight's Vow. She can get Abyssal Mass. She can get Frozen Heart. A lot of things pretty good. And she's one of the best like offensive engaged champs in the game. Really short cooldown on the ult. And just lots and lots of CC. Like 3 different spells that CC with very short cooldowns later on in the game. And she's extremely tanky early on, which is very good if you're trying to fight through minions or if you're trying to tower dive. She can be really good with that. So what's the problem with Leona then? Why is she not S tier? Well, she's, very vulnerable if you're weak side. So it's really hard to escape ganks as Leona. It's hard to peel your ADC as Leona. Like, you can do some stuff, but you don't have any displacements. You just kind of have some stuns. So you can kind of do stuff, but you don't have, like, a shield of a Rakan or a Janna. You don't have a peel like a Janna. So she's okay at peeling, but not amazing. You really want to be ahead, and you want to be forcing action on the enemy with Leona. So she is vulnerable to gank. She is vulnerable if she's walking around trying to ward. Not as vulnerable as like a Brand, because she is tanky. She's going to have more time to walk back to help or something like that if you get jumped. And you can CC and like buy time. But she's not going to have a lot of great ways to get away if you're in a bad situation. So that's the one thing, is she has one direction, and that's forward. She does not go backward. She does not retreat very well. So if you're ahead, if you can force a lot of action, your Dravens, Tristanas, whatever, then yeah, she's going to be really good. And a lot of champs out there are, like we were talking about with Blitzcrank, it's open season, right? You're going to have a lot of squishy champs that don't have dashes to dodge your ult, and, you know, probably don't want to build Mercury Treads, so they're going to get chain CC'd, and it's going to be a problem. I will say, unlike something like Rakan or Nautilus or Blitz or Pike, Cleanse is extremely powerful against her because everything she does is a stun. All of her CCs are stuns. So, and really she needs to chain them together to have, like, maximum effectiveness. So, if the enemy ADC takes Cleanse, then that's going to be very, very effective against you compared to some of the other engaged champs. So just be aware of that. That Cleanse does have a longer cooldown than your ult, especially when you get ability haste, but you know, it is a little bit easier for them to counter you with a summoner spell than it would be with some other champs. Okay, Melio has a little bit of a lower win rate, but I still think that he's quite good. He does have knockback and peel, sort of similar to Janna, so he can stop engage really well. His ultimate, being able to cleanse all CC, is extremely good as well in a lot of situations. And the fact that he can do a double shield on the same person, or he can split it up on different people, so he's got kind of a super shield, potentially, makes him like one of the best anti-burst sort of enchanters out there. So you throw that huge shield on him, and you have a big heal on your ult, and it cleanses them. So there's a lot of situations where if the enemy has a fed person, it's just almost impossible to kill them through Melio. It's really, really obnoxious just how much healing and shielding he can get. And if he gets something like Locket or Redemption, I think Locket's pretty uncommon on him, but Redemption is pretty good to go with all that, then it's just really, really hard. Or even like Shirelia's, once he cleanses, just giving them that movement speed to run away. He can also get, if you don't have a lot of dive or threat on him, he can get Ardent Sensor, you know, to give that extra attack speed, give that extra on-hit damage. I mean, Janna and Sona can do that too. So, he's pretty good. And his W, for that extra range, is particularly obnoxious when that's combined with something like Jinx or Twitch, who already have just astronomical ranges on their abilities, right? Like, your Twitch is already going to have, like, 850 range if he goes max. And so giving them an extra, I don't remember if it's a flat amount or a percentage, but giving them an extra minimum, like 100, 150 range is just nuts with those types of champs specifically. And you can bully early on because of the way that your W interacts with Aerie. It's going to put like 2 or 3 Aeries on them when you throw the W on them. So that's a lot of shield from that. And it gives the extra attack range so they can attack really well. And it heals. So it's just an extremely powerful trading tool early on. And kind of like Janna, he can be, if you position well, really good against a lot of engaged champs. So he's really obnoxious to deal with, especially with a lot of these high-level ADC, like scaling ADCs that have long range that are so strong right now. Okay, so Melio, win rate is lower, but I think he's underrated. He personally can be a little bit vulnerable when he's trying to ward because he is squishy. And he doesn't have a dash, but he does have that movement speed, which is pretty nice with the E to kind of get out of there. And kind of like Janna, he has a displacement, so he can push people back with that ball if he hits it. I think it's probably a little bit harder to hit than Janna. It's got like a bit of a slower animation. But nevertheless, like, he's pretty solid all around. So I don't know. The only reason I don't have him in S tier is just because his win rate is like 2 or 3 percentage points under like Janna and Sona. And they're kind of serving a similar type of role. So I'll knock him down to A, but I could definitely see an argument, especially like maybe higher level play, like pro players that want to play an Enchanter. I think he'd be on the short list. I think they would play him over something like Janna or Sona, just for some of the reasons I described. And he has been played in pro, and I don't remember what his win rate was, but I think it was pretty respectable. But for like Emerald Minus, which is mostly what I'm looking at here, I think putting him at tier 2 is fair. Okay, and then Pike got a couple of buffs a couple of patches ago. I'm not really sure exactly what they were. I don't remember. But his win rate is pretty high. He is, just like a lot of these other hook can engage champs, he is very good if you're able to hook, some of these squishy enchanters or some of these squishy ADCs that don't have a lot of dodges. So hooks are pretty good. He is somewhat resistant to poke in lane 2, which can be a problem if you're playing something like Nautilus or Leona, or even Rakan to a lesser extent. Rakan can kind of deal with poke too if you're landing a lot of Qs to heal yourself and heal your ally, and you get that kind of refillable shield that comes up, your passive every now and then. But, that's going to make him good against some of these other bully champs early on that might try to pressure him. Stuff like a Brand, or even things like Jinx plus Janna, which can do a lot of harassment to melee champs early. And Janna's gonna have a much harder time peeling him because of the nature of the hook. And his E is a pretty fast animation too. The thing where he goes in and goes for the stun. So you can peel that with Tornado, but you have to be extremely fast. And if he's already dashed in like that with the little shadow behind him, even if you ult and knock him back, the shadow is still gonna stun the person if he's already completed that animation. So displacements don't work as well against him as they do with some other champs because it's so fast, the animation, and if you displace him after the animation, it's not going to matter. So he's pretty good. They did nerf the lethality items, so that is kind of lame on him, but they're still pretty good. Let's be real, they're pretty good. And he's probably the best vision person in the game. I would even give him a bit of an edge over Rakan, because he's going to have higher base HP. I think he's a little bit tankier than Rakan is in terms of base stats. And he has not only a free dash like Rakan, he can just jump over walls, but it also stuns people that try to chase him. And he can go invisible with his W, and he gets accelerated movement when he's moving in his W. So he is extremely difficult to catch a lot of the times, even more so than Rakan, I think. They're both really hard to catch in different situations. I think Rakan has a much more reliable engage. You don't have to fish for a hook. Rakan can also get to the back line a lot easier, and he can CC multiple people a lot easier. And he has a shield, so he's a lot better at protecting against burst, especially once he gets Locket. He's going to take Guardian, all of that. It's really hard to burst someone through Rakan. So Rakan is such a versatile champ in that he's really good on defense and he's really good on offense. And there just aren't a lot of other champs on the list that do that. So Pike, still really good. Probably better vision control, better engage in the laning phase, probably a little bit more resistant, or at least on par with Rakan in terms of poke. His items are more expensive, so if you're doing very well, if you're ahead, if you're landing lots of ults, a lot of these champs are not going to be able to dash out of your ult very well. They got rid of Gale Force, just like we're talking about with a lot of these other engaged champs, so it's a lot more, and these champs, again, are squishy, so it's going to be a lot more likely you're going to be able to execute the Sona, the Janna, Jinx, all that stuff. And shields don't prevent the execute, because it's not damage, it's an execute. So even if someone is at 10% health, and Janna gives him a shield, or Melio even double shields him, gives him 1,000 shield, and they've got 250 health left, and the execute range is 400, they're dead. So it doesn't technically break the shield. He's not great against shields if they have a lot of health, but if they're low, he ignores the shields. So that's really handy in a lot of situations too. Okay, so I think Pike's pretty good for those reasons, just the way the meta has shifted, and he got a couple of buffs without he got nerfs, which is kind of a wash, but he's doing pretty well right now. He's got 52, 53%. And then the rest of these aren't in any particular order. I think that all of these are viable. If you're really good, if you're very well practiced on these champs, I could see arguments for them moving up a little bit. In certain matchups, I could see arguments for them moving up a little bit. In different elo brackets, I could see arguments for them moving up. So for example, Ashe is a very hotly contested pick in Pro, but in solo queue, she has a much lower win rate. And in my opinion, just not that great until you're in Diamond Plus. The deal with that is you have to land a lot of auto attacks safely and just get a lot of harassment in the laning phase to get a lot of value out of Ashe. So the arrow, the engage is good. She has the vision to some extent if you know how to use that hawk shot well, if you know the pathing of the jungler and stuff like that. It's like having extra wards early, and that is very handy when you're playing a pressure champ that just wants to put them in a tower and just harass them under tower, get some tower plates, stuff like that. So pairing her with something historically like a Varus is what people have been playing her with in Pro. You could play Varus in solo queue. You could probably also make her work with like Jinx, Jhin, Caitlyn, just a lot of these other champs that are able to like pressure and siege early. She can be good, but she's going to be really vulnerable. Her items are expensive. Well, she gets Mandate, I think, still. I'm not sure after the nerfs, but she gets some fairly cheap items. She can get Umbral. So, but she falls off a cliff. Like, her damage really falls off. She's just kind of a slow bot and arrow bot later on in the game, which is okay. She's extremely vulnerable to engage. So just all that stuff with squishy champs and just doesn't have the same scaling as enchanters do. So that's why I have her a little bit lower. But if you're with the right comp, and you know how to pressure really well and not get hit by the hooks, the engages and stuff like that, she can be good. But even against stuff like Janna or Sona, they have shields. And their abilities are probably going to do more base damage early on, especially if they take Airy than she will. So you got to be careful with these trades. Against Brand, he's going to outrange you. Probably not your W, but your auto attacks he's going to outrange. So you got to be careful. So you have to position extremely well and have a really good sense of danger and get good quality auto attacks off to make Ashe work. And I just think a lot of people below Diamond at a minimum probably just aren't going to be able to pull that off consistently. So that's why I have her a bit lower. Zyra, I could definitely see Zyra if you're really good with her going into tier 2. I know Dave's a big fan of Zyra in the chat. I prefer Brand a little bit more. Zyra's cooldowns are just so long. It just feels like you just don't do any damage unless you have a plant available. And unless your random plant spawns just happen to be right next to the enemy at the perfect spot, I really wish they would rework that passive so it's a lot more predictable. I think her plants are like an 18-second cooldown, 16 or 18 seconds, and you really don't want to put points in the plants because it doesn't increase your damage. Like, all it does is lowers the cooldown of the plants a little bit, but then you're sacrificing damage from your actual spells. It'd be nice if the W at least made the plants do more damage, or something like that. So, I don't know. Very, very similar to Brand. She does have slightly better vision control because you can put plants in a bush, but if you're using a seed to check a bush, that means you're not going to have that seed for combat if a fight breaks out. So she's just really, really dependent on those plants. And the cooldown is just way, way too high, in my opinion. And people can kill the plants too, especially like long-range champs. They're just like 1 or 2 auto attacks and they're dead. So, anyways, I think she can be good. I like her design. I used to play a lot of Zyra back in the day. But I think she's just, needs a little bit of a rework, a little bit of rebalancing on some things to bring her back full steam. Although, I mean, again, her win rate is pretty high. It's like 50, 52, 53%. So if you're good on her, go for it. Soraka's okay. She's really annoying in lane. She's one of the best kind of neutralizers. If you just want to force a neutral lane, especially if the enemy team doesn't have fantastic engage, she could be pretty good against other enchanters. She is probably one of the most vulnerable enchanters to getting blown up if you're rotating around, similar to Sona. She's got a silence, but she doesn't even have like a reliable speed up. You have to hit your Q on people that can oftentimes flash or dash it. So she's okay. She is pretty hard countered by Grievous Wounds, versus a lot of these other champs have some kind of shield or other utility they bring. She's almost strictly a heal bot. So they did buff her a couple of patches ago. I think the movement speed on her Q got buffed, which is nice. But I think she just needs a little bit more utility. I'm not sure what that would be. It'd be interesting. They could see if it would be OP. If, like, maybe the very center of a Q, if you land it, it's like a short stun, like a 1-second stun. Maybe worth exploring. Would that be OP? I don't know. But I just feel like she needs a little bit more CC in there somewhere. Or, like, maybe make her heal, like, make it a 1/3 shield and 2/3 heal or something like that, just so she has, like, mixed shielding and healing, so she's not as hard countered by Grievous Wounds. Would that make her too strong? Again, I don't know. So she's an interesting champ, but it's kind of an old school design. I think she could use a little bit of a rework or like adjustment of some of her abilities to give her more utility. If they need to tap down her healing in order to give her more utility, I think that would be a fair trade-off. So put the stun in the middle of the queue, but maybe her heals get a 20 HP hit or something, or they increase the CD on the queue, something like that. Okay, Alistar is still pretty good. We're just about out of time, so I guess I'll just cover these last couple. Alistar is okay. He does. He's just very, very short range for engage. I think it's 600 on your headbutt, and then you've got the Q for the pulverize, and it's a really long cooldown on that. So it's like you do have nice engage, but you kind of run out of gas after that. He's extremely good at diving with his ultimate at level 6 because it reduces the damage so much. And he can engage, through minions, which is nice, just like Leona and Rakan. So you can stand up on the minion wave and pressure while at the same time using those minions as a shield to protect you from enemy hooks and things like that. And he does sustain pretty well through harassment. People that are constantly just peppering you, with auto attacks and Sona Qs and stuff like that. Like, it's annoying, but you are going to be able to get some healing in there. So that's good. I don't remember if it still heals the wave or not. I think they took that out. So he used to be very good at pushing because his heal would heal the wave too. But it does heal your ally some, so that's nice. And the Nautilus is somebody that gets picked a lot in Pro. I don't think his win rate is amazing. And in solo queue, his win rate's abysmal. It's like 48 or 49%. But he's got such a good kit. It's a shame that his win rate is so low. I would like to put him higher. I think I may have had him higher on the last patch I did. But I think what it all comes down to is his stats are just so low. Like, he's got a shield, and his base armor, isn't like super low, but it's not as high as like Leona or Alistar. I think it's like 36, and the big boy and girl tanks are like 44. So it's a little bit lower. It's a little bit lower per level. His damage is pretty low compared to what it used to be. The ultimate is very nice, right? Like, it's got this knock-up that's not affected by Merc Treads, not affected by Cleanse. So it's really, really good, and it can hit multiple targets, and it can't miss. It's just point-click with still pretty good range. It's like 800 or 900 range. So his ultimate is one of the best engaged tools in the game, which is why he gets played in Pro. The hook is pretty nice because it's a massive hitbox. It's a lot easier to hit than most other hooks open field. And you can use it to escape. Really good recon players, even if someone's about to engage on you, if you throw the hook, even if you get CC'd, if they land their CC first, then your hook will still pull you out of the situation. So it's kind of tricky to do that. You got to practice him a lot to land that, but it can be good. You can also interrupt other people that are trying to engage on you with displacements. So if Zach's like flying over a wall trying to engage and you hook him in midair, it'll pull him out of that animation, so he won't get to land and do the E. So that's pretty nice, kind of like a Janna tornado. So it doesn't push him back, but it stops the spell, which is handy. But yeah, I think he's just squishier than some of the other ones. His CC duration is like not that long. It's okay. It's not as long as like Leona's. His ability to CC multiple targets with auto attacks is really nice, but his auto attack animation is really slow. So I don't know. Like, it still feels like he should be pretty good, but I think it's just a combination of lower survivability than some other tanks, lower damage than some of the other tanks, and he just has like a massive hitbox too. Like, it's really easy to hit him with stuff. So that's also a thing. And he can't engage over walls. So that's actually quite big, is that if you get pressure around an objective, you can't hook somebody. You can't like hook the support over a wall in the same way that you could with like a Blitz, or you can't jump over the wall with Rakan and then jump back with somebody else. Like, you have to either ult them, or if you take something like Hex Flash, I guess you can Hex Flash over the wall, but it's just a lot more dangerous and like gimmicky to try to pull it off than it is with other champs. So I think that does hurt him quite a bit. If you're really good at getting vision control, it's just going to take away a lot of pick opportunities that other engages would probably have. And then the last one I'll talk about is Maokai. I know we're over an hour, but I'll hit him because he has kind of fallen from grace. He has been nerfed several times. He doesn't pair particularly well with scaling ADCs because he's just going to get dumpstered in lane unless you're strong-sided. If your jungler is going to come down and camp for you, yes, your W is very good. Being able to flash W is pretty much guaranteed CC. That's nice. Your ultimate is virtually guaranteed CC on at least one person. And in solo queue, a lot of times they're not going to ball up and block part of that ultimate either. So I think he's still pretty good in the jungle. They may have nerfed his jungle too. I can't remember. I think he's still like okay in the jungle, but he's just really low range with all of his stuff except for his ultimate, kind of like Alistar. I guess the Seed is longer range, but his W is short range. His Q is short range. His damage is pretty good on single target. Like, his Q does quite a bit. and it's on a fairly low cooldown, so that's nice. He also does have like some okay wave clear if you're maxing the Q first, so that you can help your ADC push faster. That's always nice. And the seeds are really good vision control too. Now they did nerf the seeds quite a bit. I don't remember everything they changed about it. But it still provides good vision, even though perhaps not as much damage as it used to. And his base stats, kind of similar to Nautilus, are a little bit lower than some of the other like bigger tanks out there. So, anyways, he's still okay. His win rate's still alright. Again, if you're really good on him, then you can still make him work. But he has kind of fallen a little bit from his glory days. They also nerfed Solstice Slay, which, you know, does hurt Nautilus and Maokai. Especially Maokai, because his sort of way that he would start fights a lot of times is the R, and then when the R hits, then you try to run in with your W. When that R hits, it would give you the Solstice Slay for a lot of that extra movement speed, and then you'd be able to run in and land your W. So, and I guess the same is sort of true maybe of Nautilus. You'd get the Slay, then you'd be able to walk in and or like reposition and land your hook better if you needed to. But anyways, that seems to have affected them more so than other champs. Versus like Rakan does like Slay, but he can also use like the Dream Bubble one. He can make good use of the damage reduction one. So, I don't know. These two are still really good if you're good on them. I would put them as high as probably tier 2. But I feel like they do get peeled pretty well. Like they can't put enough pressure. Well, Maokai has a hard time putting pressure on Jinx, Kog'Maw, Twitch early. Nautilus can, but he can also get disrupted pre-6 pretty easily by Janna. If he tries to hook and go in and she tornadoes, that really stuffs a lot of his engage. And he doesn't have any sustain like a lot of these other engaged champs, like your Pike, like your Rakan. So he is going to be vulnerable to poke. So anyways, these champs are all like, they're all viable if you can land them, if you can do well with them. But I got to get out of here. That's about an hour. I got some other stuff I got to take care of. But anyways, what do you think? What are some of the strong champs you've seen so far? Are there some other really interesting builds going on out there? And other than that, have a great day, and I'll see everybody next time.